Are we on the air?
Am I on the air?
You're on the air?
On the air 24/7. Your news talk giant, TNT.
That's right. We are on the air, the final segment to the final hour of this live broadcast here on the Patrick Henningsen Show. Pleased to welcome onto the stage independent journalist, also veteran of the Bilderberg Meeting circuit over the years, Tony Gosling, joining us from Britain, from the great city of Bristol. Tony, Bilderberg 2024 guest lists have been released. Tell us more.
Hi, Pat. Well, thanks for asking me on, but I feel like I ought to start by saying something about Bristol's significance. I mean, I was a journalist working in London in the late 80s and early 90s, and I find Bristol a lot better place to work because it's almost like London is so full of crooks and criminals. It's quite difficult to pick them apart, and they're all hiding one behind another. But Bristol here, it's actually a lot easier to figure out who's in charge, who's running things, which is a thing called the Society of Merchant Venturers. They are basically the local Illuminati, started in the medieval times, and they were involved in the financing of John Cabot's trip to discover North America. So, you know, there you've got, all in a nutshell, the sort of beginnings of this Atlantic ruling class elite, where the Bristol merchants basically went over, did genocide. It was a reconnaissance for genocide, Cabot's trip in 1497. And so in a way here, Bristol, I feel like what I'm doing with my radio show here and also today is trying to make a little bit of redress for the hideous, you know, genocide that was created over in amongst the North American Indians, the Native Americans, and this colonization of the so-called New World and the beginnings of this New World Order we're having to deal with today. As a journalist coming across the Bilderbergers in 1996, I was actually on a site we'd squatted in Wandsworth, in West London, to make a point about too much luxury housing. And this chap came over to me and he said, well, what about these Bilderbergers? They're really in charge. Well, who are they? And I dutifully wrote down the name and looked it up, and I thought, my God, I managed to get hold of, through a friend, a journalist friend, who had access to the Reuters archive database, which wasn't available anywhere near the internet, but he brought me out some Bilderberg articles, and they were lists of meetings, and it said at the top, not for publication, press release. Immediately, my journalist's juices started flowing, and I'm thinking, what the hell are you talking about? How can a press release not be for publication? It was clearly something that they were trying to keep secret, but they were giving a sort of nod and a wink to those in the know at the top of the mainstream media certainly in London and the other capitals around Europe and the United States. Please just keep a lid on this. And so those press releases from the mid 1990s and early 90s, where people like Bill Clinton and Tony Blair were going to Bilderberg conferences, I just put them up on the internet. And a few weeks later, I got a call from the service provider saying, hey, you've got overloaded on your, there's been some attack on your site. And it wasn't, it was just because loads of people around the world had discovered the site, were sharing it, and sharing information about these secret meetings of in the NATO countries. Basically, this is the political lobby, the main political lobby in the NATO countries. And over the years that I've been doing this, certainly since they started in the 1950s, being chaired by a former SS officer, they have managed to ultimately, I think, take control of the political system within the NATO countries. And, we're now looking at this proxy war with Russia through Ukraine, which these lot are very much involved with, I believe, Patrick.
So, Tony, what are some of the names that jump out at you? There's quite a few Ukraine hawks on there. Anne Applebaum, I saw her on the list. Dmitry Kuleba, the foreign affairs minister from Ukraine, to name a few. What are some of the names that you think are noteworthy and why?
Well, the names, okay, so I would say one of the most important is Peter Thiel. The most important name is the one that's missing this year, and that is Henry Kissinger, who passed away last year. He was one of the major figures through all the decades of Bilderberg, and he became to be the sort of honorary president of the organization. the thing with Kissinger is he'd written this book about nuclear war. Everyone respected him, but he was also very much in the business of creating manageable wars and coups. So, for example, the Turkish invasion of Cyprus, the coup in Chile, Indonesia. I mean, the list goes on and on of Kissinger's war crimes. But the fact was, he was very aware that you've got to stay away from the possibility of nuclear war. So it bothers me in a way that Kissinger isn't around. In fact, he was quite clearly saying last year, we've got to draw a line in Ukraine. We've got to end this now. Otherwise, you really are looking at a nuclear exchange potentially if we keep pushing this. And so, in a way, I'd like to. I mean, people might be amazed to hear me say it, but I'd like to see Kissinger there because he was this. He had an understanding that there's only so much you can push this U.S. hegemony. And if you start trying to literally poke the bear or other nuclear powers, then you could end up with a nuke in Washington, D.C. Or San Francisco or somewhere like that. And it's really not the cleverest thing to do. And so with Kissinger gone, the question is who's really in charge now? Well, I think there's a bit of a power struggle going on, but they all are kind of pally because they're doing very well as the sort of gods of the world in pushing the Western agenda for domination of the world. And the main people, I think, is Peter Thiel is a particularly interesting character. He's very powerful, the founder of Palantir. He's there. He's also on the steering committee. In fact, on my Bilderberg.org website, you will find links to the mugshots of these criminals on the steering committee of Bilderberg. And these people, I think, it's important to understand who they are, where they come from. But Thiel is, I think, absolutely ruthless in deciding two things in a way, which is that electronic money is going to be pushed, and the idea of cash is out of the window. Of course, he's the founder of PayPal. This is him feathering his own nest. And the other thing is the financing of social media and the control of the media, because as we know, the mainstream legacy press is utterly, is it compromised? Is it just corrupted? I mean, they don't talk about this most important meeting. The other thing is, gotta say, the last few days I've been looking at, and I've got an interview on my program with the investigative journalist Duncan Campbell tomorrow. He is looking at these attacks that have been going on the Russian early warning ballistic missile nuclear defenses. Now, this has nothing to do with Ukraine. They're not even pointing towards Ukraine. But the Russians in Moscow will be sitting there going, well, so shall we take out the equivalents in Alaska and in North Yorkshire in England? Because this is a NATO attack on Russia in order to make it impossible for the Russians to have any early warning of incoming nuclear missiles from the NATO countries. So this is nothing to do with the Ukraine war, and the Russians know that. And they'll just simply be thinking, well, maybe it's just time we take out one of those missiles, because they are ready. They've spelt out they are ready for an all-out exchange with the United States. And these are the sorts of things that should be and must be reported. You know, I can't believe that there's no discussion about these. The other thing we've seen this week, Patrick, you've probably noticed the last few days, and particularly today, news stories out about sabotage by the Russians all over Europe, mysterious fires breaking out here, there, and everywhere. Well, anyone that knows the Gladio operation will know that those could be done by anybody, by fascists, by far-right people paid by the police, by or by almost anybody, by private security companies paid. And that's being blamed on the Russians, most squarely on the Russians. So the idea is, I think, to ramp things up in the Ukraine war. So I suppose what I'm saying with Thiel is, and Eric Schmidt's there too, obviously the Google guy, is that they are looking to control and own and steer social media, knowing that people are disillusioned with the mainstream press. They don't really watch the TV much anymore. They know most of it is lies and spin. And so they're making sure that the corralling of the alternative to that, and they want to be the people to spell out how we see, hear and think and interpret events around the world. And they're doing quite well. The fact that we've come close to the Russians potentially taking out some of Britain and NATO's nuclear defenses, potentially, is not even being reported. So that will be seen as a victory by them.
And I noticed there's some of the old luminaries there. The court scribe Gideon Rockman, global affairs correspondent for the Financial Times. He's a mainstay. Always seems to be at Bilderberg. One of the few journalists they allow in. Tony, is that his role basically as a type of stenographer for the court?
Well, just in a nutshell, what you've got there is the FT and the Economist. I mean, they are two main. I mean, many people who invest their money around the world like to predict what's going to happen. Read these publications. They're all in there, and in fact, people have even graduated as Micklethwaite. I'm just looking at his current profile. He's now changed from being from the United States, where UK, where he was editor of the Economist, to now he's the editor-in-chief of Bloomberg. So you see, he's gone up a level. Now, just to explain Bloomberg a little bit, they are obviously, many people know, a news wire service, but most of their activity and money is coming from real-time information about stocks and shares. So if you've got billions, then you will buy their real-time information. If you only got millions, not billions, then you buy their information, which is a few seconds late on all the stock prices. This is how Bloomberg make their money. The idea of them being a wire service, a news service, which is articles reprinted in our mainstream press, is really a sideshow to what Bloomberg do. So you can see these people are absolutely wedded to the financial system. They are insider dealers because they know what's going to happen. They just don't print it, and then maybe the next day they might print it when they do know, so they can use that to make vast amounts of money. So they really do see themselves, I think, as the high priests of globalization, as the editor of The Observer once called them, and almost like gods. They think that they can completely control things through these elite institutions that they own and control. It's the tech giants, I think, that are now in charge. People like Thiel and Schmidt, and they don't really, I think, have the nous that Kissinger had. The international nous to know when to stop. And that's why I think we're seeing all these, the pushing of this Ukraine war. I mean, on the ground, it's pretty much finished. The Ukrainians have run out of people to fight it, but that doesn't stop NATO. And it's the other thing important to explain is this is really just the NATO countries. You might see somebody from a country outside NATO, but they will be usually a Carnegie endowment person, somebody from one of these massive foundations, the tax-free foundations like Rockefeller, etc. So they will just be American plants or CIA plants in those countries.
Yeah, I did notice that Britain and the U.S. overly represented. There's a few token people from the Republic of Ireland, the former Taoiseach Leo Varadkar. Marcus Wallenberg of the Wallenberg family dynasty, one of the lesser known but yet more powerful European dynasties. They're Investor AB. They've got their hands in pretty much everything, Tony. So you still have the real old money there, the real European luminaries. They're still represented.
Uncrowned King of Sweden. I mean, this is what we're dealing with. It's also interesting. We've got the UK general election just about. The MPs finished yesterday. It's all candidates now, so there isn't really any democratic system in place here in Britain, and that's one of the reasons I think we've seen no Lords or MPs on this list. Now, it doesn't mean to say those people won't be there. What it does mean is that it could be embarrassing, but also, of course, they'll be tied up with doing campaigning here. But look, let's just be clear. Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, has made it absolutely crystal clear that Bilderberg and Davos are the sorts of organisations he prefers to deal with. He thinks that he can get private investment into the UK by dealing with these people. He's not interested in public investment at all. Then there's also, because he wants to hobnob with the people who are there. This is like Shell and BP. Over the years, there have been a lot of royalty going to these conferences, not so many this year. But one of the companies and the people I really would like to point out is Alex Karp from Palantir, because these people, through their software, I mean, this sort of stuff is now coming into the UK National Health Service. It's coming into a lot of areas of government through these massive corporations that are now taking over the role of the civil service, outsourced private services industries, and people like Karp. Well, the software he's using, this Palantir software, does a whole mass profiling of mass populations. So you can pick out bits of the population that you want to target with, well, whatever. Actually, even with drones, okay, because they're using this Palantir software over in Ukraine. That was admitted Christmas before last in the Times, and the article then quickly disappeared off their website. But this is being used in Ukraine to link up satellite technology for targeting, drone surveillance for targeting, and then actually drones literally going in, computers picking targets and going in and killing Russians and Chechens, whoever's fighting on the other side. So this kind of software really is their dream. You know, this is the idea is we can't get, Patrick, this is what they think, you know, I'm quite certain this is what's going on in these psychos' heads, is we can't get humans to kill humans really very well. And actually, they might turn around with a gun and kill us instead. So what we'll do is we'll use AI and we'll use computers to do all this management of the human herd. And so that's what Palantir is actually literally doing in Ukraine. It's killing Russians, but it's also being used, I think, in Libya. I'm not sure if it was Palantir, but one of these software systems where you've got a drone that's just automatically going and killing someone with no human being involved. And that's why it's interesting to see also companies like Google DeepMind there, the chief executive of that, and the head of Microsoft AI, who's also been in the news. That company's also been in the news today over, you know, what are the limits of AI. So just to run through a couple of the things on their agenda this year.
Just quickly, we got a minute left before the end of the program.
Okay, right. Well, AI is big. AI is big, and I've just explained why I think it is, because the elite want to use AI to manage the human herd. But then, of course, we've also got things like China and Russia. So Russia is very different to China. I think the Chinese, there's a lot of sharing of technology. But I would say that the companies that are listed here are, I believe, Fourth Reich companies. And that's why I wrote this book, which is The Traitors of Arnhem, Martin Bormann and the Bilderberg Group, which is showing how the Nazi money was laundered and then injected into these 750 companies after World War II. And those were used as a kind of financial Fourth Reich, which I think we're seeing right now in Madrid today.
Absolutely. And this is also what Bilderberg itself represents, is the legacy of that corporate global takeover. Tony Gosling, thank you so much for joining us for a report on Bilderberg 2024. You can follow Tony's work as well on via his social media accounts. We'll post those in the TNT chat community. Big thank you as well to Leila Haitoum from Beirut, and of course,
if you've got it, yeah.
And Basil, and yes, Tony's book. There, we'll drop that from eBay as well, and also Basil Valentine, political editor at TNT. You guys, thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place.